Hey guys, Joe Miles here with Osseo Gear. This is the Mission Whitetail podcast. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what it truly takes to kill these mature bucks. We're going to step outside the box and look at the why for gear, tactics, training, and more importantly, the mindset from over 35 years of chasing these magnificent animals all over North America. Thank you for following along and welcome to Mission Whitetail. All right, guys, welcome back to the Mission Whitetail podcast. Pretty good topic today, bow selection. That's a big expense with equipment, probably the most expensive equipment piece as a bow hunter you can buy. Clothing, bows, stands. So it's a big purchase, and it's a super important purchase. And what we have found is that, like everything else, it's important to test it and really go shoot the bows. You know, for the last 2 years, I've shot Matthews, or we both shot Matthews. Mm-hmm. Before that, I shot Hoyt for 2 or 3 years, and before that, I shot Matthews, and before that, I shot PSE. So I've shot a bunch of different bows, and now every year when the new ones come out, I like to go and test them out, and there's a ton to unpack there.
Yeah, I think that you can be a brand specific guy, but if you're trying to get the best out of the best, I think it's important to shoot the bows that you're interested in, even in different brands, to see which one's the best for that price range, because I think all the companies, they come out with one every year, and just because they came out with the latest and greatest doesn't mean you'll like it as much as the one you already have, or that it's going to stay better than the competition. I think they have like ebbs and flows when it comes to coming out with the best of the best.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten the new bow every single year. Last 2 years I've shot the same exact bow. This year with the V3X by Matthews, I saw some improvements with a longer axle to axle and some other things. But I guess before we get into brand specific, once again, and this is a horse that we keep beating, but we not sponsored by any bows, want to get the best, want to give honest feedback on the products that we use. And this year we tested the Matthews, the Hoyt, and the Prime. Those were the bows that we wanted to test. Next year, we're probably going to dump in PSE and dump in Bowtech and give it a really, really fair shake. And what we like to test, and what guys can test, the speed of the bow, how quiet they are, and the physical weight of the bow. Those are really the three things that you can test out to get real data about, not real data back. Now, not everybody has a decibel reader, but man, it's a $100 purchase to get a decibel reader.
Yeah, I don't even remember if it was. I don't remember if it was even that much. It wasn't too expensive though. If you want to even go down that route, if that matters to you,
it does to me, because I do feel like the noise the bow makes, it has the potential to make the deer jump. I know they hear a lot of the arrow coming at them, but they hear that bow, inside 40 yards. I feel like they react to the sound of the bow, and anything I can do to minimize that reaction, I want to do. And so it is a fine line, I think, between speed and noise.
Yep.
And what we have found in the last several years is that the Matthews has been by far the quietest bow. By far.
Yeah, every year, or the past couple of years we've done the test, the Matthews definitely shines with that, and it seems like it's the best or toward the top when it comes to hand shock as well, and a lot of that equates to noise. When you have that vibration, you have the hand shock, and that's what gives you that noise as well.
Yeah, the hand shock, the draw, the draw cycle or draw curve, how it feels to draw. With muscle memory, you can pretty much get used to about any of the bows nowadays because they are all so close. I mean, the biggest difference, and we did the test. It's on our YouTube channel, the Joe Miles Hunting YouTube channel. But the biggest difference we saw really was the prime, was in the middle of the pack as far as being quiet, but it really fell off in the speed category. Double digits slower feet per second than the Hoyt and the Matthews, but it also had the longest or the biggest brace height.
Yeah, I actually thought it would do a little better in the speed category. I didn't think it would win, but I thought it would be a little bit closer. So I was pretty surprised with that. And after those findings, it kind of just made my assumption, I guess, true that the Matthews and the Hoyt still are at the head of the pack.
Yeah, I agree. And to be fair, we're going to have to test the PSE. We're going to have to test the Bowtech, and because there are a lot of guys that shoot those. And let's face it, they're so close, and all these bows nowadays are so good. A guy commented on either the video or a social media post that he learned a few years ago that the bows can outshoot him.
Yep.
Meaning that with the human error we put in them is not going to be. It isn't going to matter what you shoot, but I can see that. I don't totally agree with that because I feel like if your equipment is better, if it's quieter, if it's faster, if it's more dynamically efficient, it's going to give you an advantage. So, yeah, I can see that the bows can outshoot you, but anything you can do to give yourself an advantage, even if it's just a millimeter, it's worth, looking into. So I thought maybe what we would do, Kevin, is kind of dive into the bows we have here, which happen to be, both Matthews. This is the new V3X. Guys that are listening obviously aren't going to be able to see the bows that we have laid out here, and you've got your Matthews as well. But maybe before we get into that, after our test was over, we actually went back. We had the RX-7, the Matthews V3X, and the Prime Inline 1. Is that how you say it?
Yep.
Inline 1. And those were the ones we tested, and the Matthews and the Hoyt were really, really close speed-wise. They were within 2 feet per second of each other. The Hoyt was surprisingly louder. That carbon bow was super loud. It was louder, quite 9% more than the Matthews. Yep. That's a good bit. I mean, you could noticeably hear the pop of that bow going off. And, we weren't at extreme poundage. We were at a little over 70 pounds, and we were at 28-inch draws, so nothing crazy there. And we ended up going back to the shop and getting the aluminum Venom and testing that. And the Hoyt's got some interesting stuff going on. We shot the Venom with the exact same draw length, exact same poundage against the RX-7, same draw length, same poundage, and the RX-7 was, 8-9 feet per second faster.
Yep.
And the cams, the limbs, everything the same, and we couldn't figure it out. And a guy in the shop noticed it. There were more speed balls on the string of the RX-7 than there were on the Venom. So we actually switched the strings over, and sure enough, the Venom started shooting 7-8 feet per second faster just by putting the RX-7 string on there. And then we compared that Venom to the Matthews, and you talking about almost identical.
Yep.
The Matthews was still just I think 1 or 2 decibels quieter than the Venom, but the speed was exactly the same. The Venom is a little bit heavier bow, but man, that draw cycle is nice.
Yeah, the biggest thing that surprised me, though, when we compared the RX-7 with the Venom strings and the Venom with the RX-7 strings, they shot the exact speed after we swapped the strings out. So that kind of blows my mind that I guess the RX-7 technically is a little more efficient speed-wise because we put the slower string on it and it's still shot the same as the Venom with the faster string on it.
Yeah, and so maybe the limb angles, the cams are exactly the same. So it has got to be something in the limbs, or either that carbon does something in the riser. I don't know. I'm not an engineer to be able to say why, but we saw it.
I was really pulling for the Venom too. I wanted to shoot well because, like you said, after you shot it, and feeling that draw cycle, and for some reason I've always been a fan of the Hoyt grips, and some people don't think that's a big deal, but then I hear other guys saying, well, that's what connects you to the bow, so that makes a difference. So I'm when we go back and do this test, when you get yours in, I like them both, but I kind of am going toward the Hoyt side.
Yeah, and could be. Again, we're brand neutral. I love this bow. I shot an Axis deer with it just a week or so ago.
Smoked him.
Yeah. I mean, and it shoots really well. The draw is a little rugged on the back end. It has a pretty good hump, and the Hoyt drew super smooth. So what I did is ordered a Hoyt to set up exactly like the Matthews V3X. I ordered that Venom with the 70 to 80 pound limbs, and going to match them up and shoot them both for about a month, and then kind of make a decision. But because it should come down to that, right?
Yep.
I mean, if the performance is that close, if the speed, the sound are that close, and you're more accurate with one over the other, I mean, accuracy trumps everything. You can have the quietest, fastest bow on the planet. If you can't shoot it, that's just foolish.
Yeah, you want to hit what you're trying to hit, that's for sure.
yes you do.
You can't do that. Keep it at the house.
That's a problem. If you could have the most efficient.
Last time I checked,
yeah. All right, well, let's dive into kind of how we have these bows set up, and talk about some of the components, and we run pretty similar stuff. There are some differences. I'll just start kind of out with mine, and let's talk about brace height for a minute. So a lot of guys don't understand brace height, and I think it's an important component. So the brace height defined is the length or the distance from the throat of the grip, or a lot of times the burger hole, to the string.
Yep.
And this Matthews V3X has a 6-inch brace height, and the Venom also has a 6-inch brace height. The RX-7 had a 6.25-inch brace height, and then the Prime, which everybody talks about its shootability and that sort of thing, it's got a 7-inch brace height. And basically, the pros and cons to a longer or shorter brace height. A shorter brace height, like a 6-inch brace height compared to a 7-inch brace height, is going to get you more speed because you're drawing the bow further back from the resting point.
Yeah, the power stroke
is longer.
Yep.
So when you have a shorter brace height, you're going to get more power, more speed out of the bow. When you have a longer brace height, theoretically you should get less speed, but the arrow actually stays on the string longer. A shorter amount of time. So in theory, it's more forgiving.
Right.
Because with you gripping the bow, when you let break the shot, a longer brace height gets the arrow off the string faster, so less human interference.
Right.
But you give up some power stroke or some speed with that.
Yep.
So I may have said that a little bit confusing, but shorter brace heights, faster speeds, longer brace heights, more forgiving.
Yep.
That's apples to apples, in theory, what that's supposed to do. With the modern bows and the efficiency, it used to be a 6-inch brace height could actually be a problem with your shooting. Now the 6, the 6.25, the 6.5, I have not seen anything that's making a bow super unforgiving with a shorter brace height. You don't see any, or I don't see any, or haven't any under 6 inches. I mean, I hadn't seen a 5.5. Have you?
I know there have been. I don't know if there's any mainline ones out this year. It seems like right around 6 is that sweet spot.
I agree, and that's, the faster bows are hovering at that 6.25 range, and they're still really good shooting bows.
Yep.
So the brace height on this bow, the Matthews V3X, again, is 6 inches. It's getting plenty of speed. What about your bow, Kev?
I think that's the Traverse, the Matthews Traverse. I think it's a 6.5. It's kind of like their hybrid, or it was their hybrid kind of target/hunting bow. It's a little bit longer axle to axle, and those little bit longer bows tend to have a longer brace height.
There you go. Okay, and we're looking at these bows from a whitetail hunting perspective. This is a bow that we're going to have in tree stands and ground blinds, and for me personally, I like a more compact bow. My axle to axle with this V3X, I went with the 29. The VRX or VXR
Yep.
that I shot for the last 2 years, it was 28. And what was starting to happen at the 28 was the string angle when you would draw the bow on a really short axle-to-axle bow. I was having to really torque my head down and not able to use as good a form. And the 29 has helped with that a good bit. I have a 29-inch draw, 29-inch axle-to-axle. That's helped with that string angle. I think actually a 30-inch would be about perfect for me. I still get the compactness that I like in a bow, so I can wiggle it around in the trees. It doesn't get in the way. It's easier to shoot under limbs and that sort of thing, but still maintain really good form and have a string angle that's more doable. Well, I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, when I shot your bow a handful of times setting it up, and I went from shooting that 28-inch triax, and I had to do the same thing, dipping my nose down to the string a good bit, and I felt like at least shooting out of like the stands, any kind of angled shots, I could be sacrificing some accuracy there. So I could shoot it well, but I wasn't too crazy about it. That bow there, your new one, it definitely feels better than the 28-inch bow. But I'm with you. I like that 30-inch to 33-inch range. Like I said, the Traverse is a 33, and I could notice a big difference. I don't have to move my head at all when I draw and I go to anchor. So that was a big thing for me. I think it helps a good bit when I practice shooting out of the saddle, out of the tree stand as well.
So you do like one, if your ideal length axle to axle would be 33 or
the 30 to 33. I hunted all year with that one last year out of the saddle and didn't have any problem with it, but I think I could shoot that VX3, that 29 really well, but I don't think the 33-inch bow is
too big.
Is too big. Now, much bigger than that, if you're hunting out of a ground blind, one of them smaller ground blinds, you might run into some issues.
Yeah. Okay, well, moving on from axle to axle, maybe we hop into the sights.
Yeah.
Let's talk about sights for a minute. It's important to try out a bunch of sights and see what you like. We tried 2 new sights this year that I really didn't like either one of them. I'm obviously not going to bring them up. Don't want to do any brand bashing here. The sight that I continue going back to and have run for the last 7-8 years, the Black Gold. I've got the Ascent is the one that I have on this bow, and I've had that sight for 4 years, and I really like the sight. The thing I like, I guess, most about Black Gold is really 3 things. I run a 3-pin sight that's movable. I like to have the ability to move the sight, and it locks in tight. I don't have to worry about, when I lock it in, I don't have to worry about it getting hung on my pack or a limb or something and adjusting. So the ability to lock it down so it can't move is important. I like the fact that you can custom order the sight pins. You can get the 019s or the 10s, and you can mix and match the colors. They give you that option. I really like that. And then they are a real well-built, kind of bulletproof sight, but they're not super heavy. Some of these higher-end sights are so heavy that they really cause the bow. You have to take your back bar and push it far out to make it balance. So I feel like they really nailed it on the weight and still being a super strong kind of bulletproof type sight. I guess if I had one negative is they don't have the micro adjust on the ones that I have, and I would Black Gold, if you're listening, man, if y'all could put a micro adjust on these things, it would be the absolute ultimate.
Yeah, I know they do make one. I don't know if it's a slider with micro adjust, but to your point about them being lighter, that's probably why they're lighter too. It'd probably bulk them up a little bit, putting those micro adjust deals in there. I don't know, but I'm with you. I shoot. I think it's the same exact one. Mine's the Mountain Light, the Ascent Mountain Light Black Gold, and like you're saying, the customization. I really like that. I guess the sunshade, or I forget what they call it, but it blocks the brighter sun or light from getting into your fibers and creating that blooming effect when you're looking at your pins in brighter conditions. What else? I like that they have the first, second, and third axis adjustments, and I also run the 3-pin. I never really move it in the hunting situations. It's usually 30 yards and in when I'm shooting in the timber, but it's nice to have the ability to shoot out to 100 yards if you want in the yard or whatever when you're practicing.
And I think another thing maybe we touch on is single pin versus multiple pins. A lot of guys shoot single pins, and I understand that there's less clutter, there's less stuff in the sight ring. I think we were talking to Andy the other day, and he was talking about it really helped with his target panic just having one pin in there and to focus on one pin. I have a little bit different train of thought there. We talk about the opportunities we get on deer. Big deer is so few and far between. I don't want to get stuck dialing my sight to 45 yards and, he's following a doe and she kind of runs from him and comes in to 20 yards or vice versa. He spooks. He's coming right down a trail. Okay, I'm going to shoot him at 20 yards, and then he decides to turn and go another way, and I've got one little hole at 30 yards, and I don't have time to move it. And I know that would happen to me. And I just, for me, having 3 pins, I shoot a speed that allows me to shoot 0 to 30 with the same pin, and then I've got a 40 and 50. In 32 years of bow hunting, I've shot one deer over 50 yards. I shot a deer in Montana at 52. So most of the shots, like you say, are 30 yards and in, which would set itself up for a single pin. But man, if you get him at 40 and you're dialed at 20 with that single pin sight, it just, to me, there's too much that can go wrong there.
Yeah, and there's some guys out there that can just set their pin at 25 or 30 yards and know their holdovers and hold unders. But I'm like you, if there's something that can go wrong, it's going to happen to me in the freaking tree. And having those extra 2 pins in there, it doesn't bother me that much. And my bow's shooting at that 285 speed range, so the pins aren't jumbled up, just stacked right on top of each other. There's just enough gap there to where I can see the belly of the deer and the top of the deer, so I don't feel like, I guess, that claustrophobic feeling where it's not just a wall of pins. I think that's what a lot of guys get. They get see that wall of pins, and then they get kind of that claustrophobic or anxiety when they can't see around it, and that's when they kind of start punching the trigger. But I have a hard enough time when I'm shooting, at the shop. I'll dial out to 60 yards, shoot a little bit, put my bow down, I'll come back and I'll go, okay, I'm going to shoot at 30 yards one time. and I forget to touch that dial, and I send one
forever. So that's why the fence out there's got
couple blemishes.
We have all done that, but it does seem like it's a lesson that we kind of, it's good to happen on the range because and again, when we go into the stand, I've never moved it.
Mm-mm.
I moved it shooting some stuff out west, elk, mule deer, red stag, that sort of stuff where it's longer shots. But for whitetail, man, 3 pins is you're right there.
That's what I really like about these sites, and other ones make them similar. Other companies make them similar too, but it's like that perfect blend. You got your whitetail fixed 3-pin sight, and then you also have the slider for when you're practicing during the off season, shooting those double distance shots to make you, better at those chip shots.
Yeah. So, and just to finish up on the sights, the way I have set mine up, I found sitting in a ground blind one morning in the pitch black dark, I watched my pins 2 mornings in a row, and the green always got bright the fastest.
Yep.
And it could be my eyes, but I think you've read somewhere that the green
is brighter.
Green is the brightest. So the way, if you're going to order one of these sites, the way I have mine set up is I have green at the top, and that's a 019. So it gets brightest the fastest, and it's the largest because it's going to be the closest shot.
Yep. And
get brightest because if you are shooting right at first light, you're not going to be poking them out to 40, 50 yards because you can't see that far.
Right.
So that pin is going to be brightest first, and it's the closest yardage, so I have it the biggest. And then I go red at 40, and then I go back to green at 50, and those are 10s. Those are 010 size pins. They're smaller, and I do that on purpose because it's a finer aperture to aim with. So I'll call them 19 at the top, then 10s, then 10. And for me, that's worked really, really good.
Yeah, my bow setup is I have a little bit shorter draw length than you, and I think you have those 75-pound mods in your bow, so you get a little more speed than my bow. I max it out at 70, but so it's a little bit slower. I got this one dialed in. It's just the regular 20, 30, 40, and they're all 19s. I got the green for the brightest at the top, red, and yellow. But they're all 19s. I'm running a 4-power magnifier and a 1.0 clarifier in the peep. On mine, messing around for target shooting. I don't know if I'm going to hunt with it. I really like it. I would like to hunt with it, but like I said, if something bad could go wrong, it's going to happen to me. And I've had my binoculars and things like that fog up when you're excited and you accidentally breathe into them on a cold morning, and so I got to test that.
All right, moving on from the sights, let's hop into the rest. That's a super important part of your bow, if not maybe the most important part.
Yeah.
If you don't have a real tunable, bulletproof, repeatable rest, you can get in big trouble. We have found that out being in extreme temperatures in the Midwest and having rest actually freeze up on us. And the rest that for the last 3 years has been the Hamsky. I always equate it for guys that shoot rifles. It's kind of the night force of rest as the night force is to scopes and the long range shooting. It's just a real bulletproof rest that's going to track and be repeatable, and one that it's a limb driven rest versus a cable driven rest. And you being a bow tech, you can talk a little more specific. I know this will probably maybe bore some guys, but it's an important part to educate yourself on. A lot of guys, what is limb driven, what is cable driven, what does that mean, why is one better than another, which one's easier to tune, which one holds its tune. They made some changes to it. These Epsilons are different than the Trinity Pro that we ran last year. Maybe dive into the rest, Kevin, and educate us all on being a bow tech, what you have found.
So I guess we'll do cable versus limb driven, kind of explain that real quick. The cable driven rests are, you literally attach the launcher cord to the down cable on your bow. So that cable that goes downward, that goes through the roller guard or your whatever kind of guard you got for your cables, you attach it, the launcher cord to that, and it's spring loaded. So once you have it timed to your draw length, when you shoot, that quick release lets the cable the launcher drop, but it's all spring loaded. So for a lot of guys, and we've actually seen it in person, if you're hunting, especially when you're hunting cold temperatures, there's a good chance that sucker can lock up and it's not going to fall if it freezes, or if you get some kind of gunk in it. Another thing that I'm not crazy about is once they wear out, they'll start slapping your shelf, and the shelf is right above your grip where the arrow goes. So a lot of guys like them, but the reason that we switched to the Hamsky is literally that reason. Your rest kind of freezing up in Kansas, and the Hamsky is a limb-driven rest. So you connect your launcher cable to either the top or the bottom limb, and that literally forces the launcher out of the way. So if it's for some reason it locks up, it'll rip it out of the way when you shoot. Another reason I like the Hamsky is you can adjust the timing for the launcher. So if you want your launcher to get out of the way quicker, you can adjust it further away from the end of the limb, more toward the riser. And if you want it to hold your arrow longer, you can adjust it toward the end of the limb, toward the cams, and it'll pull the launcher out of the way later on in the cycle. So just question on that. So the limb-driven rest has the ability to hold your arrow longer than the cable-driven rest. Would that be accurate? Yeah, and some guys like that, and other guys don't like it. I think and this is just in my opinion, I like my launcher to drop at that about 50% mark of the power stroke. That's kind of the sweet spot I've found for it gives the arrow enough stability to shoot it accurately, but it also gets that launcher off the arrow, and I think it's a little more forgiving the sooner you get that launcher off of the arrow.
So, a lot of guys won't be tuning their own bows. They won't be putting their own launchers on. The pro shops will do that. But for guys that are, it's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. I've started learning more and more about it. You obviously have been a bow tech for many years. And I like, fletching my own arrows some. I like, tying some stuff in and that sort of stuff. So learning more and more about the tuning process. Would you say that the Hamsky with the limb-driven rest is easier to tune, harder to tune? What have you found compared to the cable-driven rest?
So the two that I have the most experience with are these Epsilons. I've set up like 10 bows already with these, and then the QAD integrated, and then the QAD HBX.
But you did hundreds of those.
Yeah, and then also the Hamsky Trinity Pro. But as far as now that they made these click micro adjust on these Epsilons, for micro tuning, they're just exactly the same as the QAD, the integrated one. When it comes to tuning, I think the Epsilons or the cable drivens are a little bit easier, just because if you adjust your elevation for some reason, that'll take on a cable driven rest, that'll take your timing out So if you go up, for example, it's going to make that cable, the cord that attaches your cable and attaches to your launcher, tauter. So that could take your cams out of time a little bit, and vice versa. If you come down with it, it makes that cord not as taut, and it might take your launcher out of time to where it won't even trigger it to drop, and then you're ripping fletchings off your launcher. With the Hamskis, regardless of when you're adjusting it, you just take that little Allen key, loosen it, it pulls the launcher up, and then you go up or down, and then you pull it back taut and lock it in. So you can't really forget about it.
It's going to get out of the way.
Yep.
So that's and I think the ability of it in freezing cold weather to get frozen is, I mean, we've had them in some cold weather and absolutely no issues. Yeah,
the one thing that somebody could argue too, and I can see it, but is if you draw and for some reason, there's no tension on the launcher cable, and your launcher doesn't come up because it's spring loaded for it to come up. But they use some heavy duty springs inside of those. So something really bad would have to happen for that. It's
a movable part, and it could fail. Guys that want something that's bulletproof would be like a whisker biscuit or something like that. But you're going to have we're talking millimeters again. It's going to slow your arrow down some. The accuracy is not going to be as good. The tunability is not going to be as good. But it's bulletproof.
Yeah, but this day and age, I hope you're shooting a drop away. They make, between those two, if you want to go cable driven or the Hamsky, the QAD and the Hamsky for limb driven, those two are top notch. And I would just because you can wear those whisker biscuits out, and then once you start wearing them out, then you're losing your tune. And then with these, you don't wear out the launcher unless you put some felt on it, and that's just not even a 1/16 of an inch if you wear the felt out. So I think reliability tuning wise, you're going to have better success with a drop away for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, heck, a bolt could come loose with the whisker biscuit. I mean, anything can happen. And when the drop aways first came out, just like the mechanical broadheads, there were issues, and as technology increased and got better, they've basically mastered them. And I mean, personally, I know a couple guys that shoot the whisker biscuits, and they're kind of old school, but 99% of the hunters I know shoot drop away rests. So
yeah, especially if you shoot a lot. If you're shooting through the whisker biscuit, you'll wear out some fletchings pretty quick. At least I know when the whisker biscuits came out, I did. I wore the fletchings, slap off a bunch of my arrows.
Yep. All right, let's move on to stabilizers, back bars.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys run stabilizers. I think everybody I know shoots with at least a stabilizer on it. Probably not as popular are the back bars. I started running a back bar 4 or 5 years ago, and what it does is it balances the bow. You've got a sight, a quiver mount, your rest, everything on the right side of the bow, and if you're a right-handed shooter, and then you've got your back bar that runs out obviously the back of the bow, and it offsets that weight, and then it also balances out. These Matthews are known to be a little top-heavy, and it balances that right out. One thing that I found with my back bar is I had it, for guys that are on YouTube looking at this, you can see I've got my back bar actually coming out of a knuckle underneath the stabilizer, and there's obviously a hole back here that you can put a back bar straight in, but that had it sticking out probably 4 inches further. And I like to keep everything real compact in the tree, and every time I would move to my left, my elbow or shoulder would hit it, and it would freak me out like I was going to knock the bow off the bow hanger. And so I fixed that by moving the bar up to where the front stabilizer comes out with that knuckle. and I'm still getting the same amount of. I did add a little bit of weight to it after I did that, but I'm getting the same balance. It's out of the way, and man, when I draw my bow back now and close my eyes, open them up, the bubble is right in the middle, and that's really what you're doing. And when you put the back bar on there, I think that's the thing to do. That, archery shops have balancing stands that you can put the bow on. Wayne did that for us, put it on. But then when I got back and drew it, I had to adjust it. So yeah, you can do the whole balancing thing, but putting the back bar on, having a buddy there with you, close your eyes, draw your bow, look at your bubble, and if it's one way or the other, just adjust that bar until it's right. And again, that's going to help you with your shooting.
Yeah, so maybe go let the listeners know what type of bars you're using, what lengths, and how much weight do you have on the front and the back.
So I'm using the Flatlines by Matthews, and I've got a 6-inch on the front, an 8-inch on the back. And then I've got actually a bee stinger knuckle, so I've kind of mixed and matched products there. But again,
that's what we do.
I don't care, and so that runs out the front of the knuckle actually screws in to the riser, and then the stabilizer goes into that, and then it has a quick detach for the back bar. I don't have any weight on my front. Mm-hmm. And I have 2, 4, 6, 8 ounces on the back. So that's what I'm running. It was 6 ounces when I had it running out the back.
Yeah.
When I moved it forward, no, it's the other way. I had 6 ounces when I had it sticking out the back, and then I added 2 more ounces when I moved it forward.
Yeah, the extra length when it's coming out the back. If you have a longer bar, you can get away with less weight, but you've moved it a couple inches forward, so
put a little more weight.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Let me see if I can grab my bow without knocking anything over.
Don't scratch Natalie's table. That would be a no-no.
That'll be the end of the podcast.
That would be the end of the podcast. Ah!
All right, so for my setup, I'm running the I forget what the exact name of the Shrewd bar is, but it's in the, if you go on Shrewd's website and go on the hunting stabilizers, it's the 12-inch one. I'm running that in the front. I'm also running a 8-degree down a Shrewd disconnect in the front. And then I have the Shrewd Atlas V-bar in the back.
Turn it that way.
So it's screwed right into the back of that threading in the riser. And then I have another Shrewd 9-inch bar. And I'm running 3 ounces on the back, and I run 1 in the front. I was running about 7 ounces in the back, but it was actually just weighing me down too much, and I could get away with running the 3, and I didn't really see much difference in pin float going from that weight change. I did try to do like a 15-inch bar in the front and then a 12 in the back, but it was just like you were saying, I was bumping it into actually my hip when I was practicing on the real heavy downward angles shooting out of the stand. It was always hitting my hip when I would use proper form and bend at the waist. So I went to a little bit shorter bar, but it seems to shoot really well.
Yeah, you do shoot it well. And you mentioned something a second ago about weight. And I think we both like a little heavier bow.
Yeah.
I think you're able to aim it. If you shoot it a lot, your muscles get used to holding it up. And if you will practice drawing it and holding it for a minute at a time, or even guys can hold it from 2 minutes at a time, it's good to practice that. But the little heavier weight, in the wind, aiming it just like a heavy rifle.
Right.
You take, these competition rifles, and these rifles are heavy because they're more stable. And the same thing, but if you don't practice and you got a super heavy bow, your arms are going to be trembling and shaking, and that's a bad thing. But if you shoot a lot, I like to have a little more weight on my bow, and I'm not looking for the lightest possible setup that I can have.
Yeah, we're not out west, so we're not packing, millions of miles in chasing elk or anything with our setups. We still could, but having that little bit of extra weight doesn't bother me, and I know it makes me more accurate, especially when I get that adrenaline going and I'm, breathing heavier when it's coming down to the moment of truth there. So anything that helps with accuracy, I'm going to go to, I'm going to favor that way for sure.
Yep. Absolutely. I guess the last thing on the bow to talk about, really, we could talk about peep. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Like I run a peep sight and a kisser button. I like to have the 3 points of contact, or I like to have my peep sight as a reference point. I put my nose on the string as a reference point, and then I guess maybe this is a little bit old school. I like to have the kisser button, so I've got that as my third reference point. I know you started running one of the nose buttons and seemed to like that more than you liked your kisser button.
Yeah, I run the nose button. I like it a lot. I use the smaller one, the Bowmore nose button. They come in a pack of two. One's a bigger one and then a smaller one. I like that smaller one. But I also like that extra point of contact in the crease of my mouth. So I just put a serving ball right there where your kisser button would go. I don't want something as big as a kisser because I feel like I'm not used to them. They kind of push the string away from my face or put too much string contact on my face. So I just put that little reference point. But I really like, I could shoot it without it with just the nose button, but I really like that nose button, especially if you wear a face mask. You can just pull that face mask down under the bridge of your nose, and you'll feel your anchor point pretty well.
Now, 3/16 peep.
With this housing, I almost wish I bought the Big Dog 2-inch sight housing for my black gold. This is I think the one I got is the normal 1.5 or 1.75 one.
Half, yeah.
So with my draw length, and I had to do some testing, but with my draw length, a 1/8 peep diameter fits that housing really well, and I just shoot way better with that one. I always ran a 3/16, but I tested it in low light, and I don't really see much of a difference for me. So I use a 1/8 just because it fits right around that sight housing better, and I there's less wiggle room for when I'm taking those longer shots.
Gotcha. I run the 3/16, have forever, and it that works good for me. Don't have light issues. A lot of guys are taking their peeps out, and that seemed to be a trend there for a while. No peep, and I'm sure there's some guys that are going to listen to this and say they have no problem shooting with no peep, but man, the accuracy you give up is immense.
Yeah, you're giving up way more accuracy for, I don't know what, because if I can't see through my peep, I can't even see my pins usually. So I don't think you're gaining anything shooting without it. But some guys, they're Chase Courtney, he can drill anything he wants and he shoots no peep. So
yeah, to each his own.
Yeah.
But how much more accurate would Chase be if he had a peep?
I don't know what to call him up and ask him.
All right, so enough about the string, peeps, kisser buttons, D-loops. I guess the last thing really on the bow to talk about are the quivers. And this, for me, this is probably one of the cheapest quivers out there. It's about $40, but man, do I love it. This is the Headlock quiver by G5 is who makes it, and it is a simple, efficient quiver. It's got a cam lock right here that's silent, and it just pops right off of this little circular piece right here. I guess that would be the male end, Kevin.
Yeah.
This would be the female end.
Keep your face away from that male end.
So, and it comes with a bracket that you screw into the tree. It's got a really good self-tapping screw. You screw it in that matches that, and then it just cams right on the tree, and I love that. So it makes it really easy, really efficient. It's inexpensive, but it is the best quiver system that I have found and run, and it's just completely silent and super, super easy. Talk about your quiver and what you've got, and then I want to come back to quivers and shooting for a minute once you talk about your quiver.
So I actually left the quiver at the office, but I'll tell you about it. It's just it's the older style Matthews Webb. I think it's a 5-arrow quiver. I only run like 3 or 4 arrows in it. But it's the old school. I think it was when they came out with the gridlock risers. So it's not even the newest. It's not the newest one, but it's basically the same design where you cam lock it in. And I guess that's really my only gripe about the quiver is when, let me grab the bow real quick. When you cam lock the quiver in on this bracket connected to my riser here, it's metal on metal, and we're pretty big about metal on metal anything. We're always putting, hockey tape or whatever on things to cut that down. So I have to be real careful when I get to the stand, when I'm taking my quiver off, to, take it off really easy. And if you guys decide to go with the Matthews and go with this type quiver, make sure when you put your bow hanger in a pine tree, keep this bracket away from the sap, because it'll squawk like a freaking stuck chicken. If you don't, ask me how I know.
Squawk like a stuck chicken. That's some serious.
That's some
squawking.
Squawking.
God, dog.
And then the only kind of modification I did to mine was I took the head of the quiver where it where the broadheads go up into the foam. I took it off of the bracket and put I don't know, it was probably like a 6-inch piece of paracord, and I looped it through each one of the brackets and bolted that head back on. That way I have a something to hang it from, instead of just trying to hang it on the arrows or the actual quiver. It's just a little easier to hang.
We're going to need to get you the G5 headlock quiver.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about getting that one. It's just the old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it deal, and I haven't been thinking about it. I never shoot with the quiver on really anyway. So
that is I'm glad. I'm going to segue right into that.
Yeah.
So I made a post the other day about shooting, and in wrapping up today's podcast, guys say, I never shoot standing, I never shoot sitting, I never shoot with my quiver on, I never shoot with my quiver off. That is, you have to do that. You're climbing out one morning, you've put your quiver on your bow, you're climbing down, you turn around, and here he comes.
Yep.
You don't have time to take it off. Now, these are extremes, vice versa. You only shoot with your quiver off. Well, you've had or your quiver on. I only shoot with my quiver on. So in that scenario, if you always leave it on, it's gonna that's not a situation where that could happen. But if you say you only shoot with it off, you absolutely could have to make a shot with your quiver on your bow. Vice versa, I only shoot sitting down. Well, if you've climbed up in the afternoon, you're standing up, hanging all your stuff up, and you turn around, and there he is.
Yep.
What are you going to do, sit down? So I guess the moral of the story is practice all of those.
Right.
Practice shooting, quiver on, quiver off, standing, sitting, kneeling. Practice all those. Another thing is, with these thumb or push button releases, or even your wrist strap releases, man, if some sand or grit or a bearing goes out in those things and they don't work, and you find that out when you're in the stand, how do you shoot? Can you shoot with your fingers? How far accurate are you with your fingers? Can you draw your bow back with your fingers? Try all that stuff out so you're mitigating all of that risk. You don't have to shoot all the time with your fingers, but know, hey, I'm good out to, I've got to use, this is hypothetical, I got to use my 40-yard pin to shoot 20 yards, but you know that I can make a 20-yard shot and your hunt's not totally ruined because your rest failed or your release failed on you. So I guess that's, from a shooting standpoint, shoot in every possible situation. Shoot in the wind, shoot when it's freezing cold, shoot with all your hunting gear on. The guy said, I can't outshoot my equipment, but you want to try everything.
Yeah, you want the best shooting equipment
that you can get.
Yeah, so if you have, an error, it could kind of make up for it. And to your quiver point, we usually don't, as much as we can, shoot with the quiver, in a hunting situation, because as soon as you put that quiver on, you're taking your bow out of tune. You just put all that weight onto the side of the bow, and then as you keep shooting and take an arrow out, that's 460 grains you just took off of the other side of the bow. So like you said, shoot it with it on. Maybe even shoot it with a couple arrows out of it, because you're going to be taking arrows out of it when you're shooting. But yeah, that's good to know before you have to do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, those are things that can happen. They absolutely can happen. And, back to, the title of this podcast was selecting your bow. I think the best thing, most guys are going to go into a pro shop and somebody has told them, hey, Matthews is the way to go, Hoyt's the way to go, and they're going to go in and they're going to just pick what they read about or heard somebody say. Go in, pick the bow up, shoot it. The pro shops, most all of them have ranges that you can shoot the bows, get a feel for it. If you can do some speed tests, shoot them through chronographs. If you want to go as far as getting a decibel reader and testing them out, you can do that. That's extreme. That's a little over the top, but
just go on Joe Miles hunting YouTube page. He'll do it for you.
You could do that too. But really, go in and shoot these things. They're all good bows now. PSE makes a good bow. Bowtech makes a good bow. Matthews makes a great bow. Hoyt makes a good bow. They're all really good bows, and you can't really go wrong. We're splitting hairs. Yeah. But again, Mission Whitetail, we want the best possible equipment we can have, and we want to test it and bring it to guys in a real setting. So, guys, once again, appreciate it. This kind of concludes this podcast. We might add some footage of our bow test to the YouTube channel. But we'll be back in a couple weeks. And as always, any questions, comments, let us know. Appreciate the feedback, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, guys.